find all of his work at stevepieczenik.com. All the news he covers, the geopolitics he gets into. And specifically, I wanted to get Steve on to talk about this story that came out of The Intercept 2 days ago. Headline reads, Trump White House weighing plans for private spies to counter deep state enemies. It's suggesting that under the control, essentially, of CIA Director Mike Pompeo, that working with Blackwater founder Eric Prince, they're going to be forming a team of spies to counter, essentially, the deep state spies trying to remove President Trump from office. Dr. PIECZENIK, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll get right into it with you. Have you heard of this story? Does it make sense to you? What do you think about this?
There's an old Mad Magazine concept of the spy versus spy, the spies in white hat versus the spies in black hat. It's an interesting concept. I don't know Prince. I've met him once before with a group of intelligence operatives, and he explained to us how, there it is, you got it, and it's Antonio Prohias. He's a Cuban who created that cartoon series. I think we're getting into that. I think it's an interesting idea. The deep state entails probably 16 to 18 different intelligence networks. The issue of Blackwater and Prince, he came out of the SEALs. By the way, he was not a great SEAL himself. He set up Blackwater, and then they went into Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere, and they changed their name to G and Academia or Academy. The private spies are, I'm hesitant because I'm not very impressed with many of the spies. We have too many spies as it is right now. We have thousands and thousands of people who have top secret clearance. I myself, no matter what I did, I refused top secret clearance or any clearance for about 30 to 40 years for the simple fact that these clearances don't mean very much. And the compartmentalization of the spy business hasn't been very effective. In fact, most of the spying business is too fragmented, and having the DNI created over all of them makes it even more of a problem. 5 million security clearance, there you are. I think it's totally absurd. I think we're over manned and really understaffed intellectually. I don't think most of our spies are really trained very well. I think the initial concept of psychology and psychological insights into nation states, into individuals, the basis of the OSS, and then the basis of the CIA, where I was trained at MIT, was a far more effective procedure than somebody who's in the technical aspects. That doesn't mean that you don't need people who work in cyber terrorism and who work at the NSA, but the NSA has really imploded for several months already, because you have some of the people involved in the NSA who came in and used their own trickster tools.
By the way, Doc, it's Alex Jones. How you doing?
Fine. Who's there? Who's that?
It's Alex. I'm just popping in for a minute because I was walking by and listening. I was just going to say, what do you make of it all coming out that they illegally surveilled the White House, Flynn, everybody to get this when they denied it previously? That's interesting. And then separately, where'd you get that wooden American flag I see right there?
Well, it's a locally made thing. It's by a guy named Collins at Ace Hardware, and he built it for us specifically for the show. And I'm very proud of him. We're in North Central Florida, but it's
really
crazy.
He built that specifically for the show?
Yes, absolutely. You know, we feel that the show is important, and I think it's important to have something behind me that represents some of my feelings about the country and make it a
Well,
local.
that's a weird twist of fate, because I got told by two guys who were there when Trump first got in, but like the first day, went over to the CIA headquarters, the second day, and he gave them all out American flags carved in wood like that. And I saw a picture of one that looked just like that. So I thought, did Trump give PIECZENIK that flag?
No, I don't think Trump even knows me, but I'd be very honored. No, we actually made that flag, and we thought...
Well, it looks good, and it's crazy that it's there, because I saw him giving some school kids one, too. I think that's his thing. So you have good taste. Hey, but separately, what do you make of the whole Mueller thing? in all this, because the wheels have come off, in my view, where they're all working for Hillary and they're involved with Russia. I mean, should Trump fire Mueller, or just let them run their course and discredit themselves? I'm gonna watch. I'm out of here. Sorry to pop in on the war room.
I think it's a very good question, but as you know, I'm kind of a psychological pool player. And what I believe is I'm going to do a side shot, a pocket shot. And what I mean by that is I think Mueller, although you and I agree that Mueller should have been fired, is really going to remain there and is working with Trump. And this is my supposition. And the reason for that is that Mike Flynn's son was given immunity. And I think, as I understand it, there is no prosecution of the son who should have been prosecuted. And in turn, Mike Flynn will take the burden of responsibility, and he will negotiate his term and conviction down to probably a fine of $250,000, in return for which he will name probably Jared Kushner, who I've said all along as the individual who gave him the authority to do some illegal actions. And I think this is the way Trump, and why I call it a side shot, this is the way that Trump has to deal with his own son-in-law without looking at him directly and firing him. Ironically, despite The Apprentice show, I had a feeling, in a sense, that Trump has always had a problem firing people who are very close to him. And that's not atypical of somebody like Trump. Even though they come across with a lot of bravado and they're boisterous, underneath they have a certain fear of really confronting somebody and firing him. Jared should have left a long time ago. Jared is a problem. He's a problem now with this issue of Jerusalem. He was a problem before when he allied himself with the young king of Saudi Arabia. That didn't work. And he's just a disaster. And John Kelly has correctly put him into the West Wing all by himself, because Jared came across as the man who could do everything and turned out to be the young boy who could do nothing. And that was kind of expected by me. I mean, he was not one of the brightest guys. He's never been that bright. He's never had to work for anything. He never served our country. He never really had to build a company. And instead, his father had to pay Harvard $2.5 million to put him into Harvard. And even his Hebrew high school, Fish, which is an Orthodox Hebrew high school, said this is not a stellar candidate. In short, translated means this is not a very bright guy. And to be an Orthodox Jew and go around and make believe that you have all this wisdom, or you perceive yourself to be wise, is a very dangerous arrogance. And that arrogance carried over into policies that don't really work. And it's going to be a real problem in the Middle East.
I want to get into more of that on the other side, but real quickly, I want you to expand on something in the last 60 seconds here. You said that you believe Trump is working with Mueller. Do you mean that you think that this whole thing of Mueller seemingly going after everything on the Trump team is a ruse, and that really he's trying to drown out the actual rats in the swamp? Or what did you mean exactly by that?
Well, what I meant was, I think what I'm saying is it's a side pocket deal. What I think Trump has done with Mueller is to allow Mueller to go after the only person he needs to really go after, which is his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, which he can't do, because Flynn was ordered by Kushner to do certain illegal activities prior to the election. That's what I mean. And there is a certain kind of quiet collusion between Mueller and Trump. Otherwise, Trump would have fired him a long time ago. And the reality is, and it's not brought up, is that Mueller did give Flynn's son immunity and is not going to prosecute him. That is the key to this element, and that's why.
All right, we're going to break. When we get back, we're going to expand on that and talk about Trump. All right, Steve PIECZENIK is our guest here. Welcome back to the War Room. I'm the host, Owen Shroyer. President Trump declares Jerusalem the capital of Israel today, and it has a lot of people freaking out, of course. You cannot, how dare you say Israel is the capital of Jerusalem, or excuse me, Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. You're going to upset all of the loving, peaceful, extremist Muslims and all of the Palestinians. But it is an interesting situation. There's all kinds of different sides to this story. Dr. PIECZENIK, what are your takes on Trump announcing Jerusalem as the official capital of Israel?
I think that's a mistake. The reason he made that announcement is simply because he promised Bibi he would do it, and it gives Bibi cover in order to do all kinds of things. Basically, that announcement is detrimental primarily to the IDF, to the young people who serve in the Israeli Defense Force. And they know that when they have to go into the streets now, the Gaza, West Bank, and elsewhere, they will be targeted. And this is a very dangerous statement simply because we know that all the major organizations in the Israeli government are located in Jerusalem, but the notion that Jerusalem is the official capital of Israel is not. It really was putting a major burden on the Israelis and on the Israeli people and taking the burden off of Bibi. Now, I've been involved in the Camp David Accords. That was done primarily by President Carter, and it was done through the auspices of Cyrus Vance and Stanfield Turner of the CIA, and it was involving a lot of Foreign Service officers. But each individual involved in that accord, including Menachem Begin, whom I knew informally, gave up land for that. Sadat gave up the notion of war. In the case of declaring Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, Bibi gives up nothing. He never has given up anything. And Bibi has been in trouble for a long time. And from my point of view, it's time that Bibi has to go. The issue of the American embassy, it's already there for the most part. And most of the Muslims know this. The Israelis know this. But it places a lot of our allies into a very deep state of danger. In particular, King Hussein of Jordan, who's been a very close ally of the United States. He supported much of Israel's activities and has really been very effective along our lines. The same thing with Dubai, Egypt, and it puts a cleavage in between the Sunni Muslims and among themselves and Israel and the United States. Turkey, who has been an ally of ours for God knows for decades, has put Erdogan in a very awkward position where he needs to basically say, look, I can't continue my détente with Israel because one of the understandings that we have is that Israel has not stated outwardly that Jerusalem is the capital. He didn't need to do that. I don't think it changes the dynamics of the peace process in any positive way. I think it's, again, the product of people who've never been in the field, Steve Miller or Jared Kushner or the bankruptcy lawyer, and it shows an incredible amount of audacity and very little understanding of the different dynamics that's involved. For the most part, I would say on the side of the covert part, it's probably a cover for Bibi and the new prince of Saudi Arabia to work together and for America to ship over $100 billion worth of arms to Saudi Arabia and allow Israel and Saudi Arabia to develop a stronger tie against Iran. But it's not a smart strategic move.
Which, of course, was the deal that Trump cut months ago with the weapons going to Saudi Arabia, something that hasn't actually happened, if I'm understanding it correctly. They made the deal, but it hadn't actually happened yet. And so you're saying, and this may be kind of the spark plug to initiate that. And the one thing to me was, you know, I don't know how this really impacts me. Perhaps I'll figure that out in the future, or maybe we'll start to see how this impacts America. But one thing about this that I thought was certainly not accurate, at least in the way it's being portrayed. This was the headline on Vice News, just one example. Trump pleasing his base could spark a firestorm in the Middle East. So they're basically saying that Trump moving the capital of Israel to Jerusalem and the embassy to Jerusalem is pleasing his base. Well, I don't find that true. I don't remember Trump's base chanting, Jerusalem is the capital, Jerusalem is the capital. No, I remember them chanting, lock her up and build that wall.
Yeah, actually, you're quite right, Owen. I don't remember that. I think you're absolutely right. That was not an issue in the campaign, and he made a statement to a group of Jewish individuals, none of whom I know really served our country. They were all neocons, and many of them have dual citizenship, like Michael Chertoff with Israel and the United States. But that was not an issue in the campaign. And if they're implying that the base is Christian evangelicals, I don't remember any of them saying that we had a state as Jerusalem as the capital. So that was not the basis. Owen, you're right on. I didn't hear that.
Yeah, so again, and I just want you to kind of reiterate what you stated before, but in a more precise manner. So who does this move please? Who does Trump make this move to please? What chess pieces on the board is he trying to move around here?
Jared was building an alliance with the young prince of Saudi Arabia, and who has now taken what basically was a coup and made himself the principal minister of defense and the heir to the present king. At the same time, the weapons have been promised to Saudi Arabia, and then Saudi Arabia and Israel want to make a closer alliance, which they've always had, by the way. This has not been a great secret in the State Department, but they've made a closer alliance so that they can confront Iran. And this is all about an issue of trying to drive Iran out of the Middle East, and it won't work. Iran has been there for centuries. Iran is Persian. It's not really Arab in any way. It's a Shiite country. It hasn't in any way attacked America. I mean, basically, when we went into Iraq, they said, look, you're making a big mistake, and we're going to take over Iraq. When we went to Syria, we made a big mistake. They took over Syria. They took over the eastern part of Saudi Arabia. They took over part of Bahrain, and now they're in conflict in Yemen with Saudi Arabia. So this is a continuation of a proxy war. We don't need to overtly be involved in this proxy war. We were supplying actually both sides, but at this particular point, Trump thinks he's going to supply the Saudis. There isn't money there for that $100 billion weaponry, and I don't think the Saudis are going to continue with the young prince. If I were a colonel in Saudi Arabia, I'd have a military coup within 48 hours and get rid of that prince, because he's totally ineffectual and totally disastrous for the young people of Saudi Arabia. They have 40% unemployment. They have a 50% problem in drugs and addiction to high addictive drugs. And they have to change from a Saudi or a Wahhabi strict religion into a more modern age, and he can't do that. He's just as grandiose as Jared is and as inexperienced. But there'll probably be a military coup somewhere in the Saudi Arabia.
All right, final discussion here in this segment before we move on, Steve. You mentioned Yemen, which to me right now it looks like Libya and Yemen are both destabilizing, as
Correct.
Syria seems to be stabilizing now. What do you make of that?
Well, when you hit it on the head, what happened over the years, and you just said it correctly, I had warned against going into Syria. As I said before, I'd been in Syria prior to this. I warned our CIA not to go in. And, of course, this was the brilliant idea of Hillary Clinton and Panetta and Petraeus to go in and destabilize Libya so that they could ship arms into ISIS and elsewhere. Well, this is the price that we paid. We lost Libya, we lost Iraq, we lost Syria. The fact that we lost Syria is done in a very elegant way because the Syrians and the Iranians haven't gloated over the notion that they won and they beat us, and that was predictable. So what will happen there is Russia will act as a mediator between the United States, Germany, Turkey, the Syrians, and various elements of the Kurds. And that will be a successful outcome because Putin really understands the dynamics of the different people. In terms of the Middle East, and with this pronouncement, it puts Putin on a notice that we have a little problem here, and he's going to have to work harder because he has to work with Erdogan, and he and Erdogan have to work with the Iranians to make sure that they keep the whole place stabilized. They don't want to destabilize the area. Unfortunately, again, the young
All right, Dr. PIECZENIK, great stuff as usual. I hope you can join us again as this international geopolitics continues to get crazier.